The great philosopher Taylor Swift sings, "I had a marvelous time ruining everything." I was wondering what kind of reaction this quote would get, especially with that name. I thought it'd be more of a reaction. So I wanted to use that quote to introduce the topic of the great and spacious internet. Now, the title for this comes from, there are several cultures that have tree of life legends or myths. And they include Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, and pre-Columbian North America, along with many other parts of the world. I borrowed the great and spacious internet from a reference that Latter-day Saints, which are prevalent in this area, might recognize as part of the Tree of Life story from the Book of Mormon. Now, in this Book of Mormon, it talks about a great and spacious building, and the building represents the pride of the world. So when I'm talking about the great and spacious internet, that's really what I'm trying to refer to. And this is what it says in the Book of Mormon, in the book called 1 Nephi 8:27. Quote, "The building, the great and spacious building, was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female, and their manner of dress was exceedingly fine, and they were in the attitude of mocking and pointing fingers toward those who had come and were partaking of the fruit." Close quote. So when I'm speaking of the great and spacious internet, I'm talking about the pride of the world, but also this attitude of mocking and pointing fingers at others. So here's a depiction of Tree of Life art. I don't like this one. And one of the reasons I don't like it is because the great and spacious building is so far removed from where the people are. I don't think that's where the internet is. Most of us have access to the internet. It's not that far removed. Here's another depiction, which I don't like, in part because the great and spacious building has pets. And it kind of infers a certain religion or a certain area of the world for it. It, I think, injects a bias when we're looking at it. I'm not comfortable with this art. This art I like because the people in the great and spacious building are so close to the people who are trying to walk the tree of life, mingling with them on an ongoing basis. So I'm more fond of that. And then this being a clip from a film type piece depicting the people that are in the great and spacious building. So let's talk about the great and spacious internet. Giving a quick rundown of what the internet is. And one of the, sorry, but I feel like I was born in a really special time for my career because I got to see things that we'll never see again in the history of the world. When I was born, almost nobody had computers. And I got to see a time where computers became ubiquitous and then became connected and then became portable and then became wirelessly connected and then became globally wirelessly connected. There will probably never be a time in any of our lives where we won't be able to be wirelessly connected to people all around the world. We know what it was like before the internet and after the internet. But the people that I work with at BYU, I have 43 students that I work with, they don't get that. For example, someone came in and showed the students a floppy disk. Now, does anyone in this room know what a floppy disk is? Have you ever had experience with it? Guess what the students did when they saw it? They laughed. They thought that we had 3D printed the save icon, because the save icon depicts a floppy disk, which means nothing to them. In their lifetimes, they have never experienced that. So that was just some artist's depiction of what save would be like. It's just a totally different experience for them than it is for us. So I love that I got to be, as a technology person, a part of this era of technology that saw before and after, and was even a part of deploying the during on all this. So a quick history of the internet. In the 1950s, the internet was born as ARPANET. And it was basically meant for research institutions to communicate with the Department of Defense. So the Department of Defense would give certain universities with strong research money so that they could do things for the Department of Defense. And they wanted a way that wasn't, run on four wheels to exchange information back and forth. The first email was born in 1971. And then the protocols that were coming into play, which we don't need to jump into, but AOL, which launched in 1985, made it a consumer platform where you didn't have to have your PhD or be employed by a university to participate in the emerging internet. And then Internet Relay Chat, IRC, became a way to directly message people. And I remember being completely annoyed by it. I did not want to be interrupted by an instant message in my workday. To me, messages were something that I would carve out part of my morning and carve out part of my afternoon to go get. I did not want to be instantly messaged. I wanted to be able to deal with messages on my time. And then the beginning of the World Wide Web happened in 1989. And I very much remember that when it was all coming up. And then the first commercial dial-up service, which allowed people from their homes or their places of business to use a phone line to dial into a central place, which would then grant them access to the World Wide Web and to email and to internet resources. I see a lot of smiles and nods. We kind of remember all this, don't we? We all lived through this. So then came the next decade of the internet. The first search engine was born in 1990, the first web page in 1991. Then came the first webcam, where we had an opportunity to visually, in real time, depict images across the internet. The first photo was uploaded to the internet in 1992. And the government was really early to the party, wasn't it? It finally joined the internet in 1993 and started becoming more aware, not that they really had policies for it yet. Definitely latecomers. The first secure e-commerce transaction didn't happen until 1994. It wasn't until 1994 that something secure could happen across the internet. And of course, that gave birth to e-commerce, platforms like Amazon and other things that allows us to in online banking. The invention of Wi-Fi happened in 1997. I remember these innovations, and then Google, which is actually more important, I think, than most people understand. Google at the time knocked out all the other search engines because it used an algorithm that prioritized links. So if a lot of people were creating links to the same website, that must be important for people. So that's how you got to the top of a Google search at the beginning. And ever since, people who make websites have been trying to game the system to get themselves to the top of the search results, especially Google's. So then we have this decade, and this decade was the executive part of my career where I was in charge of large organizations and our internet use. I remember the burst of the dot-com bubble. I was overseeing technology for the city of Anchorage. I was in a meeting with all the managers, and they were all asking me what I thought of the new economy. And I did study economics at BYU. It wasn't my major, but I had macroeconomics. And I gave an unpopular opinion at the time, which by luck happened to actually be correct. I said, there is no new economy. We still create value. We still have consumers. We haven't done any of that. All we've done is change some of the ways that we're interacting with the only economy. And in 2000, a whole bunch of companies that were way overvalued and way overfunded went under. The launch of Wikipedia. If you were to ask people, do you remember Microsoft Encarta and Encyclopedia Britannica? I mean, those articles were authored by experts, and we knew who was authoring them, right? If you were to say, we've got two choices, world. One of them is to just have this platform where any Joe can hop up and write and pretend like they're an expert and put it out there. Or we can give you a free access to vetted, wonderful, authoritative, with great images that were created just for this platform, which one would win? Which one would the world all flock to? The crowdsourced encyclopedia, not the one that was actually authored by experts. That should have told us what the internet was going to do to society. But I think all of us missed it. We all missed the fall of Encarta and all of these things and watched a public domain encyclopedia like Wikipedia come up. So MySpace was citizen web pages. Anybody could put a presence on the internet now. You didn't have to have a CS degree. You didn't have to have training in HTML. You didn't have to have any of that. And people could have a voice now. It democratized our voices on the internet. Dig, iPhones and mobile web. I remember very clearly Steve Jobs with his Apple phone and thinking, meh, until he got to the part where it ran apps. And I was blown away. Because now this app completely changes its personality and character. It becomes a way to hail a ride. It becomes a device for doing your banking or for shopping. It completely transforms this thing in your pocket to be anything that the communications technology and creative app developers can make it. And that was so monumental. And then the introduction of Bitcoin. Here's another unpopular Tom opinion. I have been serving with young single adults or single adults for a long time, both at the University of Alaska and at BYU, and in church assignments in YSA Stakes. And I remember with a whole group at an activity, someone asked me what I thought of cryptocurrency. And I didn't have a good opinion of it. I said, it's not actually creating value. It's a hyped value. And it's not a value like a corporation stock would be, where they can perform and they have assets and they're creating something of value. The only way you can make money with cryptocurrency is to buy it and then hype it to everybody so that the price continues to go up and you sell it. I am literally taking advantage of you. I am taking advantage of my friends and neighbors and becoming wealthy at their expense when we're buying into something. Now, the moment a government decides to use this technology as a platform for existing currencies, then it's really viable. And I hope that we're going to do that. I know that there have been some countries who have tried that without much success. And I can even tell you probably why they haven't succeeded. But there was the introduction of Bitcoin and a whole new way of exchanging in commerce. And then this ICANN policy changes. That was a political hot potato because for some people, the internet should be free and everyone should have access. For other people, they think that some traffic should have more importance and be prioritized on the internet. And the concern is who gets to make the decision. If you're political, you're really looking at an opportunity where your traffic could be slowed or stopped and someone else's could be pushed up rather than an equal access to all that. But it became government policy to tinker with that in 2009. So now we're looking at 2010 through 2019. I'm spending too much time on this part, so I got to speed it up. The birth of social media. Holy cow. You know, it used to be that a young person could get bullied at high school and go home to a safe family where people cared about him. But with the rise of social media, that bullying could keep going into the night. And with the rise of social media came the rise of suicides with young people. And all of us were behind the curve. It took so many deaths before people woke up to all this stuff. The smart technologies, e-commerce, online entertainment, all took major leaps forward. Things like Netflix, online streaming platforms. And now we're looking at the 2020s, remote work and remote learning, especially during and post-pandemic, online entertainment. Cybersecurity has become a new, you may have heard about some critical oil pipeline in the United States that was shut down by an outside entity. And that, by the way, was made possible by Bitcoin. If our government there are only three changes we need to make to US law, and it would stop completely this kind of cyber crime. And believe me, I've written to D's and I've written to R's, and I told them I'd write out everything. And we can't get anyone to work on it because the D's are too busy pointing fingers at the R's, and the R's are too busy pointing fingers at the D's, and no one's helping. I have a friend in Alaska with a dental practice that was completely shut down by ransomware. He had to throw away his computers and shut down his practice for a time before he could stand it back up. And it is so solvable. It is really solvable. The only reason they can do this is because people have to pay these criminals via a method that allows us to not track them, Bitcoin. If we change the way cryptocurrency laws were working, then we would know who's creating and demanding payment. And without payment, they really don't have an incentive to try to hold organizations hostage. It is really fixable. They won't do it. And now we're all worried about artificial intelligence, and rightly so. Now, before I move off this slide, I need to tell you that I was doing research with one of my students, a brilliant young man. I'll call him out by name, Trent Entz, because I'm certain he's going to build some kind of technology that the whole world's going to be dependent on someday. He is so great. So we're at BYU. He's got this math problem on his screen, and he asks AI, in this case, it was Microsoft's Copilot, solve this math problem on my screen for me. Can you guess what the AI did? It said, your account is connected with Brigham Young University. It is against your honor code for me to do this. Exactly. And but it said, I can give you two other math problems that are very similar and walk you through how to solve those, and that will teach you how to solve the problem that's on your screen. There really are ethical uses for AR if we can get everyone educated to it and everyone over to the platforms that are trying to do it right. And by the way, Microsoft Copilot is an open AI product. It's the same as ChatGPT. It's just that it's can be institutionalized and aware of everything. So one of the things that we were talking about just before I stepped up is the internet good or is the internet bad? And most of us will agree that the internet has played a major role in polarizing society, right? My beliefs, your beliefs, that group, that country, this country, everything is all made polarized by the internet. But I would like to direct your attention to this. And if you're interested in, I know every once in a while you guys are photographing slides, this would be an article that people should check out. The political divide in America goes beyond polarization and tribalism. So you can Google that article and get some of what I'm about to tell you. Here's the first quote from one of the articles of that, or one of the authors of that article. Partisans on both sides have generated coherent narratives. Both points of view are coherent. They make sense to them, which they experience as capital T truth. This is true. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to my tribe. It makes sense to my group. But they're both generated narratives that they fully trust. Republicans and Democrats have sorted into identity groups that extend beyond politics. These mega identities have grown almost mutually incomprehensible. By that, they mean that if I identify with one group or identify with the other group, I can't comprehend those outside of my identity. They don't make sense to me. Therefore, the only conclusion I can arrive at is they are deliberately evil. Because I can't comprehend it, so their only motive has to be that they're bad people doing Satan's work. And both groups believe this fully about each other. Studies show that each group dramatically misperceives the other. As researchers point out, quote, Republicans estimate that 32% of Democrats are LGBT. In reality, the number is 6%. Dramatically not understanding another group. Democrats estimate that 38% of Republicans earn over $250,000 a year. In reality, it is 2%. Both groups are utterly and thoroughly convinced that they're right. Both groups are utterly and thoroughly wrong, and it makes them prejudiced. So I wrote this article a year ago in dismay, just heartbroken dismay after another mass shooting. And I went back and did what I shouldn't call research. I should not call it research, but I went back to look at certain points to see if there was any correlation, not causation, between the growth of internet technologies and what we're seeing happen in society. Because I'm not as well prepared for my presentation as I want to be, I apologize, but I'm going to read this blog article, which I posted a year ago, because it's not in my head to be able to just freely tell you. So I apologize in advance. Here's a teacher, by the way, who's holding up a sign that says, "Which of my students do I shield with my body?" Growing up in Sitka, Alaska as a kid in the 1970s, most of us boys brought knives to school every day, Swiss Army knives especially. As for guns, my middle school had an indoor rifle range. We literally brought our guns to school where I grew up in the 1970s. It was part of our school curriculum. We were expected to do it if we owned it. Our middle school had an indoor rifle range that taught us how to shoot as part of our curriculum. Most of our parents owned guns, so there were guns in almost all of our homes in Sitka, Alaska in the 1970s. However, although most young men had easy access to weapons, that's one of the arguments that people make. Well, one of the reasons we have more mass shootings today is that there's so much access to weapons. And yet we had more access to weapons in this time and place, and the training to use them to do mass harm if we ever wanted to. It never happened. It's not like we young men did not at times feel angry and estranged from society. I'm biracial. There were people in my community who didn't like me because I'm Native American, and there are people in my community who didn't like me because I wasn't Native American enough. In fact, this was a time when racism was more blatant and bullying more allowed, and mental health troubles were mocked instead of cared for. People made fun of everything mental health related, and it became part of how we teased each other. Nevertheless, mass shootings simply were not common back then and in this culture. Now, I'm not saying weapons are not a factor in mass shootings. I'm saying that weapons and access to weapons don't explain why mass shootings are far more common now than any time before. If anything, there's probably less access to weapons today, yet mass shootings have risen. What if access to weapons isn't the root of the problem? What if it's access to the internet? Before the internet, extreme ideas, disinformation, and bigotry could only come from homes, churches, clubs, and peer groups. Before the internet, I could only get my radical ideas from the people I was physically surrounded by. And comparatively speaking, extremism was slower to spread. It was limited in scope by geography, and it was so much easier for authorities to monitor before the internet. Data suggests that the rise in mass shootings parallels the rise in internet pervasiveness. In the last 11 years, prior to the invention of the web browser in 1993, The United States had exactly 14 mass shooting incidents, which averages to a mass shooting once every 287 days. As access to the internet from personal computers grew, there were 41 mass shootings between 1993 and 2010, including Columbine High School. During this period, the frequency of mass shootings almost tripled, once every 116 days. As smartphone ownership became ubiquitous between 2011 and 2014, a mass shooting occurred in the United States once every 64 days. And now that almost every young person has a smartphone, over the last 7 years, a mass shooting occurs in the United States on average once every 43 days. Mass shootings increased 667% during the very same time period where access to weapons decreased, but access to internet bigotry, bullying, disinformation, and political extremism increased. And technology doesn't just facilitate the spread of hostility, it assures that instant global fame is there for the perpetrators of violent crimes. I may go out, but everyone's going to know my name as I do it, thanks to the internet. Even when the mainstream media tries to suppress the identities of mass murderers, thanks to the internet, the perpetrators' social circles know. So it still gets to the internet, and people still know who it is that did these heinous crimes. To be clear, I am not saying that there is a causation, that internet access is causing this. I'm just saying that there's strong evidence that they could be related, and it should be funded. And real research should be done to answer these questions. And one thing I know is that the government will not likely ever solve mass shootings. Before the internet was ubiquitous, the USA averaged mass shootings once every 287 days. As I said, now it's every 43 days. During the same time period, we've seen Republicans in control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and they didn't fix it. We've seen Democrats in total control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and they didn't fix it. They didn't even prioritize it. They didn't even talk about it, neither side. And when they share power, they're sure not working together to fix this. The government probably will not fix the mass shooting problem. Nevertheless, regardless who has power, there have been 0 laws passed to substantively address the problem, whether they be gun laws or internet regulations. For example, 23 of America's 25 most deadly shootings were with automatic or semi-automatic weapons. Something could be done about that at least. Realistically, I think our best chance at ending mass shootings is innovation in the private sector. And maybe that's okay. Nevertheless, I got that right. Yes, realistic, sorry, let me catch up to my own slides here. After all, if technology is the significant cause, which I'm not saying yet that it is, for the rise in mass shootings, it stands to reason that technology could be a major part of the solution as well. And I really deeply believe that. I hope someone will listen. So let's conclude by jumping back to the Tree of Life where we started. Remember, the great and spacious building was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female, and their manner of dress was exceedingly fine, and they were in the attitude of mocking and pointing fingers toward those who weren't in their group. I love this quote by Tyler Huckabee. When Christianity is set up as a cultural battle, instead of an opportunity to serve, others are not seen as people in need of love, but as enemies who need to be feared and mistrusted. Some of us are doing Christianity wrong. It's not us against them. It's how can I help you, brother? How can I serve you, brother? What can I do for you? And as we reach out in that way, Christianity will be more attractive to more young people. and they won't be joining ideologies, but wanting to be good people. The great philosopher, Taylor Swift, sings, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me." Thank you for listening.